So now let's do a little bit more than just draw activities on the diagram and connect them up. Let's actually do some implementation on this new first activity. Let's build it out. So in order to understand how that works, let's take a look at an additional tab up here at the top. We're in the diagram view. Let's switch to the variables view. When we switch to the variables view, we can see that we have a variety of data already defined in the process. This data can come from a variety of places. We can point and click at a back-end system, have it discovered as a web service. The authoring environment will discover and introspect that web service XML schema and generate all these data types for us. Or we could have a discussion with the business in a design session and type these in on the fly as a part of a dynamic workshop. So it's very easy to get the data defined for the process, and we can do it iteratively, so we can define a little bit of data at a time and then use it in the process and build it out over time. Let's now use an activity wizard to begin building out this activity. So you can see in our activity wizard that we can get a jump start on building out an activity as a human service, as a rule service, or as a system service. A system service being a call out to any IT system via the usual open standard suspects like web services, Java, REST, JMS messaging, and so forth. So in our case here, we're going to stick with the human service for now and step through this activity wizard. You notice that it sees our data in the business process, and it'll use that data to give us a jump start on the user interface. So once we finish and open up that activity, we can see that it created something called a coach. The spirit of building out the user experience is that we want to coach the user through participating in the process. And we can name these coach screens anything we like. So I'll go ahead and name this first screen, And we'll go through here and clean up a few things so that we can more easily see everything on the screen. We can run this at any time, just like we run the process at the process level. We can run individual integration components or human service activities at any time. So we'll run this individual component, this human service, and we see that it has a user interface for it. So it's always runnable. The process is always runnable, and anything that we're building out is always runnable. Let's go ahead and change this and see how easy it is to change it and test it. So let me change the number of columns to 2 and then drag some of these elements around to make it more of a 2-column layout. So we have 2 columns. Let's move some things down below and see what that looks like. Maybe we want to run it and review it with the business stakeholders and see if that's closer to what they're looking for. So you can see the user interface is always runnable when we make changes to it. Now, usually we have more than one screen, so let's go ahead and grab another coach screen and give that a name. We'll name this the second screen. And for this screen, when we open it up, you'll notice that it's more or less empty. We can use some of the UI controls to build the UI, so I'll drag out a text control. We'll name this order number, and you can see we're able to bind it to any process data, so that this field will display the value of that process data at runtime for that specific order, or if we change it, it'll update the process data. There's an easier way to do that. You'll notice that on the visual palette we display the current data model for this process, and we can actually drag and drop any data from the process into the UI, and it'll create an appropriate UI control for us. So we can do that for this other part of the data that's going through the process. In this case, it was a nested data structure, so it built out a section UI for us. If we grab another part of the process data, this one happens to be a list of data or a collection, so it's going to create the appropriate UI control for us, in this case a table. And let me go ahead and change the names of some of these buttons so that we can go back and next through these screens, through screen 1 and screen 2. I'll go ahead and make on screen 1, I'll make this button next, so we can go from screen 1 next to screen 2. And really this last button should probably be called submit because it's the last button on the last screen. Now let's connect these screens together. Like we connect activities in a process diagram to orchestrate the flow of a business process, we can visually connect and draw out the flow through end user screens to orchestrate the experience, to orchestrate the end user experience. So we treat the user interface as a first-class member of the business process, and we allow you to more easily orchestrate the end user experience. Now watch what happens when I draw the connection from screen 2 back to screen 1. You notice that it picks up that back button. So it's very easy to connect these screens together and see what the navigation is and how it's going to work. Let's make sure that it really works the way we think it will by pressing the Run button, press the Playback button, and you can see that now we have a Next button on the first screen. We'll press that to get to the second screen, and then we can press the Back button to get back to the first screen. Now as we're building this out and discussing this with our stakeholders, we might decide that we need more information on the screen, so we'll bring out planner comments so that we can have some sort of commenting and dialogue or collaboration between different people on the team. And let's make this more of a paragraph format, make it several lines tall. And if we go ahead and save that and go back to the web browser, we don't even have to hit the playback button. We can just use the already open browser to go back to that first page, and as you can see, our changes are live. So anything we do to change the process or the individual components, activities of a process or sub-processes are immediately available for running. It's always runnable. So now let's go ahead and take another snapshot. It's so easy that it's very quick to use. And let's name this snapshot the new first activity UI. And we'll take a look at those snapshots a little bit later. So now if we run the process, we can see that now the first activity, the new first activity, when we step through it, has a user interface that we built out. If we go ahead and complete that first activity, first what I'll do is I'll put in a comment here just to show that we're actually updating the process data. And what I mean by that is when we get to the second activity and we claim that and work with that, we can see that the process data has carried forward. So now let's go ahead and make some additional changes to the process. Let's change the first activity that gets called. When I'm talking with the stakeholders, the process owners, they indicate that sometimes this create order activity doesn't get done in a timely fashion, and obviously since it's at the beginning of the process, it can really hold up the entire process. So it would be nice if the create order activity, if the analyst creating that order takes too long, if we could escalate that to a manager to help nudge it along a bit. So let's go ahead and use a timer event from our BPMN palette and decorate that first activity with a timer event. Let's configure that timer event to fire 1 hour after that step starts. So if our analyst takes too long, more than an hour, to complete that activity, a manager will be involved. We'll escalate to a manager. So now let's see how that works. We'll name this escalation timer event create order taking too long. Let's go ahead and play the process. As we vote in Chicago early and often, let's play the process early and often. As we play the process, we can see here that the analyst has a screen that they can use to create a new order to help replenish our stock. We'll go ahead and just illustrate here that they might get a phone call and then end up being on the phone too long. And if that happens, an hour could easily pass by before you know it. And so in the authoring environment, instead of waiting an hour for this timer event to fire, we have a convenient way to step through the process. As you've seen so far, we also, in the case of these timer events, have a way to fire them so that we don't have to wait for them to expire and thereby test the process and easily step through it. So now we've simulated or essentially stepped through it in the way that it would execute if we waited for an hour to expire. And now we're at the new first activity in the manager lane. So if we go ahead and claim that activity, we can see that the manager has an opportunity to provide some comments. Hey, what's taking so long? Get a move on. And now when that manager completes that escalation activity, the process proceeds to the next step, and when our analyst reviews that activity, they can see the comments in the process data from the manager that says, hey, what's going on? Why is this taking so long? So now let's go ahead and take a snapshot of this. We'll call this snapshot 5.3 escalation timer. And as you can see, now we'll clean up our work, this experimentation. And once we've cleaned up our experimentation, we'll go ahead and take a snapshot version of that and call that version 5.4 removed activities. This will give us an opportunity to see how these snapshots work a little bit more. These snapshots are not only useful across design time and runtime, but they're also very useful and convenient to help tell the story. Let's say that at the end of the day, some key business executives come in and want to see what we've done, or maybe at the end of the week, or somewhere throughout the project we're working on. So we can easily say, well, at the beginning of day one, it looked like this. Before lunch on the first day, it looked like this, as we added some detail to the process. And and as you can see, we didn't yet have a user interface for that new first activity. We had just a default human service. But then around lunchtime, we implemented a new first activity for that. And if we drill down into that, we can see the user interfaces that we built out. And oh, by the way, if we clicked through those versions while this was open, you would see the different versions of the user interface as well. So that version control works on any artifact in the entire process application, not just at the diagram view. This is where we added the escalation timer towards the middle of the afternoon, and so on goes the story. So it's very easy to version and leverage those versions across the process application, not just to control our changes, but and to take the risk out of experimentation and changing things over time, but also to more easily tell the story. And if I wanted to, I could press that playback button while I had one of the versions selected, because it's always runnable, even to the extent of immediately being able to run a process version that you've selected. So this concludes the Process Designer Tour using the Webster Lombardi Edition authoring environment, and we hope you enjoyed